RWBY.
Hello everyone and welcome to another animation speed paint video. I'm not actually that sure how much you're going to enjoy this one, considering it's none of the rough stage of animation, really only line art and forward, but I don't know, maybe some of you might enjoy seeing this. Since it's not as much work as I usually would include in a speed paint like this, it does actually go a little bit slower because of that. It did take me around, we'll say like 5-ish hours to do this whole thing, which I'm pretty happy with. I didn't really have a solid goal in mind for this. The reason I made this was because I was looking at the sprites for the BlazBlue video game, where some RWBY characters were added into it. I was looking at the sprites and being like, man, I really love these sprites. I love how they move, I love how they look. They're super fun. Really hard to draw in that style though, I will say. I did try to do a drawing of my own OC in the pixely sprite style of the BlazBlue game that I was looking at, but it took so long for something that didn't even really look all that good. But anyway, so one of the animations for RWBY herself, which of course if you don't know, this character's name is RWBY, one of her animations is of her with her scythe on her shoulder and doing a cute little sway. And I've always thought that it was a very, very cute little animation, which I'm realizing just now that she did actually do an animation similar to that in the series, where she was kind of gushing over Crescent Rose itself, which is the name of the scythe. I never really thought about that until just now, and that's me after I've animated this whole thing, which is inspired by the BlazBlue animation, which I guess is probably inspired by that moment in the series. It's just funny to think about. But anyway, I'm really happy in general with how this turned out. I think it turned out very cute for her. I wasn't entirely sure I was even going to finish the animation. I sort of started it on a whim. I guess I was really craving animation after not doing it for a while. But eventually, once I was done with these sketches, I was like, man, it's kind of a waste to do this whole animation and not record it. So that's around the time I started recording. Although I did, you probably noticed, I started recording after I had already done some of the hair and the face, which I feel like that's fine. I mean, it wasn't anything big. But yeah, so it's actually been a little bit since I've animated, which when I say that, that means it's been like a couple weeks. I often find any excuse I can to animate something. But I don't know, the last few weeks I haven't been doing so. I think I've really been struggling a lot, just with art and creation in general, which I'm sure a lot of artists can relate to in this moment of history. A lot of thoughts of like, why even try when, nothing is working out, which is a lot in part because of how art has been treated by society as a whole in the last few years, which really sucks. It's sad to know that despite all the art that is done for all these different reasons throughout history and how important it has been to a bunch of things, it's still not valued. Not enough as it should be anyway. But anyway, I don't want to talk too much about the downers of what I've been feeling. I'm sure you all have had enough of those thoughts yourselves. So instead, I'll talk a little bit about this animation here, the technicalities of it anyway. I'm animating this with Clip Studio Paint X, the most recent version of it. There are 8 frames to this movement, and I actually animated on 3s this time, which is not something I often do. In fact, I almost never animate on 3s. I don't know why I did it for this one. It just sort of happened, I guess. When I was doing the sketches and doing the timing of those, it just sort of happened to fall into being on 3s, and I was like, you know what? Sure, why not? Although, by the time I do export this, I do actually adjust the timing of the last few frames because it felt a little slow on one of the sways and I felt like it didn't match the other sway. Hard to explain, like it felt like she was in one pose a little longer than the other and I kind of wanted it to be a little more even, so then because of that I changed the timing on, I think it was frame 6 and 7. Let me check. Yes, just checked. It was those 2 frames I ended up making into 2s instead of being on 3s. I just felt like things appeared a bit smoother that way. You're not really going to see the evidence of that really until the end, but that is what I do. I think I did that after I stopped recording. I'm not sure. Anyway, for those of you who don't know, I use vector layers for my line art. I find those kinds of layers are the easiest to manipulate, particularly with, animation and adjusting small things that I need to do throughout. The brush itself is just the very basic, normal 2-pixel brush. This kind of brush I always feel is the easiest to animate with, be it this or the binary style brush at 2 pixels. I really like thin line art, personally, when I'm animating and stuff. It makes me feel like I can be more precise. But anyway, the canvas size for this particular animation was 1920 by 2160, and that's in pixels. The reason I chose the size was because I like having things large enough that they will look good on a 1920 by 1080 screen, which is generally what the size is in my videos. So that's why I decided that. I also did not feel like going in with After Effects with this one, which is why I didn't use the 2-pixel binary brush that I usually use, which many of you who have seen my other videos of animation probably know that I use. But you know, sometimes I just want to be simple with it and stick to the one program, and I think it turned out good with this sort of line art. Often the only reason I actually choose the 2-pixel binary brush is because it makes it easier to color things, which I will say, when I was doing the shading on this, I was feeling like, man, I wish I had done the binary brush, but it's fine. It didn't hurt that much. It wasn't that big of a difference, but still, it was enough where I was like, dang, maybe I should have. Also, since this is a capture of my entire screen, you'll notice that I'm using a reference for the character and the weapon. They are self-made. I have actually made references for all the main 4 characters of RWBY because I really wanted something that I personally could look at and use in my animations. I find it's easier to stick to my own art style when I do that. And also I feel like it makes my color choices a little more consistent. Other than that, you can probably see how I have the layers set up. I have these different animation folders, which if you are familiar with Clip Studio Paint animation, you will see in the Layers tab. I find separating line art from colors and line art from shading and all that, I like keeping everything as separate as possible so that I can go in and adjust things freely, as well as having those general things separate from each other. I also animate the eyes separately. I just find doing that to be easier for me, since usually eyes are so much more detailed than the rest of everything. It feels better to me personally to have them isolated on their own layers. Though I do like keeping, you know, color separated from the line art, separated from the shadows and everything on the general animation. When I do the eyes, I actually like keeping them together because then I can move and adjust the eyes all as one without having to go through my Layers tab and select everything. It's just personally how I have found is simpler to do myself. Other than that, you probably noticed by now, I'm probably at the shading, or if not, I'm probably past it. I'm actually using line art to set up the shadows rather than my usual general vibes that I go off. If you have watched my animation speed paints in the past, you know that I usually just wing it. For this one, I felt like it would be fun to actually try out the line art way of doing it, which it did make things a little smoother, I will say. I do like going off my vibes, but I gotta say, doing it this way definitely had a better outcome. I should probably do it like this all the time, but sometimes, you know, I forget. Sometimes I'm just like already on the shadows and only think of this later. But here, I thought of it beforehand, so that's why I did that here. So as just a little bit of conversation, and to battle the ever-present, ever-looming sense of dread when it comes to how art is treated by society, I want to know if you've been doing any art lately. I know it's been hard, which I understand deeply, but I want to know if you've, been working on any projects or just general ideas. I really want to hear all about these fun ideas that anyone may have. And if you're not, currently working on a project, maybe what's one that you've done in the past or that you're planning to do eventually. I'd love to hear about any of it, to be honest. And if you are struggling, I want you to know that you deserve to be able to make your art project, whatever it is. Despite all the struggles, mentally, physically, and emotionally, societally, with creating art, you do deserve to be able to bring something to fruition. And it doesn't have to be good. Nothing has to be perfect in order to be made. That's always something I have felt to be true. That's why I've finished projects. I might not like them, but something's better than nothing, And if you're familiar with this project I'm making fan art of, my favorite show, RWBY, it's such a prominent theme, being proud of art and finding great value in it. That's one of the big reasons that I still feel so strongly about the series. Of course, it has a lot of other reasons, but this is just something so universal, I'd say. Anyway, I sincerely hope that this has, maybe in some way inspired you to work on whatever it is that you want to do, even if it's just a little bit of work. That's not really the reason I made this video, but it's just something I felt like I needed to say. And maybe I'll say it again and keep saying it. People deserve to hear that they deserve to make. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little animation that I did. It was a lot of fun. Have a wonderful day. Happy creating.